So I have a statement that I'm going to read today as a follow-on to the statements that we've issued over the last several weeks concerning the computer disruption this summer, and then I'll open it up for questions. So we live in a time when modern communication and computing technology enriches our lives, gives us unprecedented access to information, and allow us to connect with others in ways unimaginable in the past. And yet, the same set of technologies, when used maliciously, has the power to cause harm in ways that even experts have trouble predicting. You don't have to be an expert to understand that no individual or organization on the planet is immune from these types of attacks these days. As has been widely reported in the national news media, state and local governments across the nation, including major cities such as Atlanta and Baltimore, along with some 23 cities and towns in Texas that just in the last 2 weeks have found themselves the object of a particular type of attack, namely those involving ransomware. Here in New Bedford, city government has been aware of the dramatic escalation in the threat environment and has been taking steps, some noticeable, others intentionally concealed, to strengthen our defenses. That said, cybersecurity experts regularly remind us that every computer network, however hardened, is always just one keyboard click away from allowing malicious code to slip past its defenses. And indeed, in early July, New Bedford experienced a ransomware attack that disrupted elements of its computer system. Since then, we have provided updates on the impact to city services and operations, but based on the advice of cybersecurity experts, we have refrained from providing specifics about the nature of the cyber attack. We are now in a position to provide more detail. The first thing to report about the attack is that it could have been made much worse. While further investigation and assessment efforts remain underway, it is clear now that, unlike the widely reported attacks in other cities, the attack here did not affect all of city government systems or disrupt the delivery of municipal services. The reason was a combination of luck, skill, and the architecture of the system. First, city government offices were closed for the July 4th holiday, so a large number of desktop workstations happened to be turned off around the same time the ransomware was attempting to spread itself across the network. Second, the city's management information system staff were able to identify and successfully disrupt the attack while it was still underway. In the early morning hours of July 5, before employees had returned to work, MIS Director Maria Pina Rocha directed her staff to disconnect computer servers and shut down systems to prevent the virus from gaining a larger foothold across the network. At a point when the nature and scope of the intrusion was far from clear, the MIS staff did not hesitate. They demonstrated their professionalism and training by making smart decisions and taking quick action. I want to express my appreciation to the hardworking MIS staff who played such a key role in countering the attack, and who have logged countless hours this summer, restoring the computer system. Third, the city's computer network was compartmentalized to a certain degree, so key departments were either spared from being identified and targeted by the virus or were quickly protected by being disconnected from the network. For example, the police department and the school department were entirely unaffected. That said, the type of cyber attack made combating it a unique challenge. The specific virus was a variant of the Ryuk virus, which is capitalized, it's an acronym, RYUK. Ryuk is a ransomware virus whose purpose is the financial extortion of the operator of a computer network. Ryuk works by encrypting data stored on computer servers and workstations, rendering the data inaccessible. The operator of the computer network must then make a payment to acquire a decryption key from the attacker, which might unlock the encrypted files. Ryuk has been implicated in attacks on government, education, private sector networks across the globe, and these attacks have been escalating in their frequency, technical sophistication, and the size of ransom demands. The city's MIS department that oversees and maintains the computer system was alert to the increasing cybersecurity threat and had been ramping up antiviral defenses for a few years. Over the past several months, MIS had begun further restricting user access to external websites, tightening security protocols, and monitoring network activity more closely. In 2016, the Office of Chief Financial Officer expanded the city's insurance coverage to cover losses related to cyber attack. and the administration, working with the City Council, put in place funding for still more antivirus software in the city budget that took effect on July 1st. Using funds available under the city's cybersecurity insurance policy in response to the data privacy event, the city engaged Data Privacy Counsel, who in turn hired a third-party forensic investigation firm on the city's behalf to conduct a forensic investigation into the incident. The outside consultants working with MIS immediately launched an initial impact analysis to determine the extent of the data encryption by the virus system-wide. The forensic investigators have been able to analyze available forensic evidence to construct a general outline of the intrusion. The Ryuk ransomware virus appears to have been activated in the early morning hours of July 5. As described earlier, MIS staff returning to work after the July 4th holiday within minutes identified an unusual network activity and began implementing protocols to protect the network. Key city departments were contacted, including the Office of CFO, the Mayor's Office, and the Police Department. The city also notified the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The analysis revealed that the extent of the Ryuk encryption varied widely across departments, with several key areas experiencing little or no loss of data and other areas experiencing significant encryption. The investigation also determined that emergency dispatch was completely unaffected and all fire, police, and EMS units could communicate and deploy normally. At no time did the cyber attack disrupt the ability of public safety departments to respond to calls for assistance. I'll note parenthetically that a number of workstations used by the fire department for administrative purposes were effective and had to be temporarily removed from service. Other major municipal services, including public schools and school district offices, water and wastewater treatment plants, trash and recycling services were likewise unaffected. The city's Munis financial management system was temporarily placed out of service but was quickly brought back online. While the initial impact analysis was still underway, the city, through its consultants, reached out to the anonymous attacker, which had provided an email address. The attacker responded with a ransom demand, specifically that it would provide a decryption key to unlock the encrypted files and return for a Bitcoin payment equal to $5.3 million. The city was thus faced with the question of whether the task of restoring the computer system without obtaining a decryption key might justify a response to the ransom demand. While I am generally averse to engaging in negotiations of this kind, I concluded it would be irresponsible to dismiss out of hand the possibility of obtaining a decryption key if the insurance coverage would cover the full cost of the ransom payment. Moreover, engaging in communications with the attacker, even if ultimately unsuccessful, would buy the city time to bolster network defenses against a potential follow-up attack. The city also would have more time to assess if it was indeed advisable to push forward with restoration of the system without the benefit of a decryption key. In light of these considerations, I decided to make a counteroffer using insurance proceeds in the amount of $400,000, which I determined to be consistent with ransoms recently paid by other municipalities. The attacker declined to make a counteroffer, rejecting the city's position outright. Without a counteroffer, the city faced the prospect of negotiating against itself, a course that I would not entertain, even if using insurance proceeds. I can report that since then, the city has further enhanced its network security and restored impacted systems. The city has installed additional endpoint security software throughout its system. We've implemented additional security practices and protocols, and the city's cybersecurity firm is developing further recommendations. The MIS department has now completely rebuilt the server network, restored most software applications, and has replaced all the computer workstations that were found to be affected. The work of the MIS staff has done to restore workstations bears closer examination because it illustrates both the relatively limited success of the attackers and the strides that the MIS staff have made since the attack. Specifically, 3,532 computers and laptops are used by city employees daily across all departments. The number affected by the ransomware attack was 158, or 4% of that total. To reiterate, the attack may have been felt much more extensively had circumstances been different. That said, other aspects of the attack will require continued recovery time and effort. MIS and departmental staff have identified backup caches that can be used to repopulate hard drives and network shared files. In instances where electronic data cannot be recovered, it is possible that field or archival data may be recollected and re-entered into affected information systems, with the city's cyber insurance policy being drawn on to finance this activity. The city intends to take a range of actions going forward. First, we will continue to restore our systems while keeping all essential services operating seamlessly. The delivery of those essential services has continued unabated since the attack, and we are going to make sure that those interacting with city government continue to receive the services they expect. That said, it is clear that there has been an internal impact on city government which will linger for some time. This will require everyone in city government to tap into reserves of patience and cooperation, as already has happened. Second, the city has decided to provide public legal notice and put in place appropriate supports related to any personal data exposure, regardless of whether it is legally required to do so. Every indication suggests that the attackers' objective was to lock up files and hold them ransom for financial compensation and not to steal data. While the city remains unaware of any theft of data by the attackers, the encryption of certain log data prevents us from completely ruling out access to any specific personal data. Although not all of the log files were accessible to our forensic team, most of them were. And the log files they could examine did not show any evidence of transfer of personal data. Therefore, the city is acting out of an abundance of caution by providing legal notice concerning personal information. Third, we will continue to take measures to prevent an attack in the future. As noted, the city has been implementing additional security measures for a while now, but the reality is that municipalities, corporations, and even private individuals are in an arms race with cyber criminals who operate in far-flung places across the globe. Every advance in antiviral technology is effective until the criminals figure out how to get around it. We live in a world now that is so interconnected that simply pulling up the proverbial drawbridge is unrealistic. We will rely on the advice of our experts to guide us, but we must remain constantly vigilant and willing to devote the resources necessary to protect our system from a much more debilitating attack than the one we just experienced. I am committed to making sure the city will do just that. And again, I do want to thank all the work on behalf of the city by the MIS team, all the folks who are here in the room, Christina Katsouridis and John Costa from MIS, Ari Skye, Michaela McDermott, Neil Mello, and so many others who've been spending a great deal of time making sure everything is continuing. So with all that, let me open it up.
I just want to boil this down because that was a lot of information. Number one, was any ransom paid?
No.
Number two, so is it safe to say that the city is attempting to recover all these encrypted files on its own completely?
It is. So recover or reconstruct, right? So in other words, if you have something that remains, some of the encrypted files you can get into, some you can't. So in certain instances, the city has taken efforts through backup servers, through email, through other sources to put them back together.
And how would you characterize the progress so far?
We've made tremendous progress. It's still, there's still some of that going on now, but we haven't seen any interruption in municipal services at all, thank God. And we're in a point now where things are starting to get more operational than they were, but it's still going to take time. We have a very large computer system, vast computer network in city government, and it just takes time to pull it all back together.
And I've heard instances of other municipalities, one in particular, but I can't remember where, that decided we're not going to pay the ransom, we're going to do it ourselves, but it was like 10 times what the ransom would have been. What's the cost? Right, so
in the case of Atlanta rejected a $50,000 ransom and ended up spending $18 million in pulling it back together. We have procured services to facilitate the reconstruction of and reconstitution of our servers and to get everything back up to speed. The services that we have procured have all been covered by our insurance policy, the one that I noted. Going forward, the city will have to devote more resources to things like MIS staffing and some antiviral software and other things. Not huge money, but we've as I said, we're in an arms race, and if this didn't happen to us, it would still be wise for us to make those investments.
So you think it's wise, essentially, if possible, to not pay the ransom, to send a message to the people who want ransom, things like that?
In general, you don't want to do it if you think that. So, what convinced me that it was worthwhile to put at least a number on the table were two things. One, that we were going to be using insurance proceeds, so ransom payments under at least our policy and those of many municipalities are covered. So we would have been using not taxpayer dollars, but insurance proceeds. And secondly, even if it didn't result in an agreement, at least we would have bought ourselves some more time to put up other defenses while and we did, while the attackers were mulling it over.
I mean, if you had to pay the original demand, couldn't Bedford have afforded it, and what would they have had to do that?
We weren't going to pay that. Yeah, there's just no way they were going to pay the original demand. So we found a number that was, we picked a number that was consistent with the ransom demands that were made by, I think it was a couple of communities in Florida not too long ago. And again, I emphasize using insurance proceeds. I was not going to entertain the payment of a ransom using public dollars.
I'm just, for my education, MIS, what does that stand for?
Management Information Systems.
Okay, like an IT department? Is that
Yeah.
what it
Services, excuse me, Management Information Services, yeah.
So you said the recovery is going to be covered by insurance, but can you put an estimated dollar value on that?
So there are a couple of things to understand. So first, that we've retained the services of consultants to help us go through the files, through all the servers, and they're still doing that work. That will be covered by insurance. The insurance policy is $1 million. We're confident that's going to be covered. There is an opportunity cost to city government by having people working on this on the recovery when they could be doing other things, and that's something that's not readily calculable, right? So that work has started to taper off now, or at least recently, and so. But out-of-pocket expenses, the city's not looking at much, if anything. Going forward, we're going to have to spend some money, as I said, on perhaps adding personnel to MIS, and perhaps a person with a security focus. We will probably need to, as I said, think of the arms race metaphor. We're going to have to continue to have the latest and greatest antiviral software. We've already done that. I mean, so that's the position cities are in now. And so after this happened, as we know, there have been many other places that have been hit. I mean, today, I guess Charlton, Massachusetts was hit. So this is news on a daily basis. Virtually every newspaper in the country has been writing about this stuff, and it's going to continue to happen. And so, we've certainly picked up a few lessons from this. I think, and I think we're going to be better off in the long run having, gone through this exercise.
Standard Times has heard from people who are quite concerned about their personal data that the city, might have on its system.
Yeah.
Can you be more specific about when you said you're providing support? What is that? What are you doing?
Yeah. So again, I emphasize that we haven't found any evidence of personal data being stolen at all. So just to give you a sense of it, we've had. So ordinarily, the ransomware attacks are not about theft, they're about locking up data, right? It's, freezing things, not actually exfiltrating information. So that's, so just as a starting point. Secondly, we had the consultants, the forensic consultants, asked to look at the log files of 11 servers that were, that potentially contained sensitive personal identifying information. So of those 11 servers, they were able to, of those 11, the log files of 7 were unencrypted. And they looked through all that and found no evidence of exfiltration of data, right? And the other 4 they couldn't get into, they remained encrypted. So we don't see any actual evidence of personal data being missing. But because it's such a big network, because it's, people are concerned for the very reason that people are actually calling about that. We haven't received too many calls about it, if any, but I can imagine people calling the newspaper and doing that. And so we want to at least be forward-leaning and say, look, if you're concerned, we'll give you, we're going to make public notice. You're going to have available credit monitoring services paid for by the city through its insurance policy, and so that'll be covered.
People feel they need that. What do they do? What do they call?
They should call. What is it?
Website.
It's on the city. You go to the city website. Yeah, it's there.
Notice on the city website?
There is, yeah.
Okay.
And you mentioned that no city services were disrupted, so as far as you know, nobody's tax payment was canceled, nobody's permits were delayed, denied?
No, that was one of the first things that we looked at. Obviously, we wanted to stop the attack when it happened. But as we've said, we've made a series of public statements in the wake of the initial attack, and we've made clear that we've seen no indication of the interruption of public services. At one point, we were wondering if the gate at the Elm Street garage had been affected, right, because it wasn't working. It turned out not to be the case. So no, we've been able to keep the trains running.
And of course, a lot of the vulnerability is most computers are on a network of some sort. Has there been any thought given to sequestering certain parts that might limit their vulnerability to such an attack?
So, yeah, without going into detail, because I don't, we want to be somewhat discreet about particular detail, but much of this, we did have many offsite backups. That is just a good practice overall. We will continue that practice to make sure that there is some level of segregation of data and redundancy, so that if something fails, there's something to replace it.
Can you quantify what portion of the city's computer system has actually been restored or rebuilt?
According to what? The number of computers, the number of workstations? I mean, as I mentioned, I think it's in the statement. I think that's all the servers are back up and running. There is, I think we said there's about 4% of the laptops and workstations were affected. Those have been replaced entirely, again, using insurance proceeds.
Only 4% of the stations themselves, the hardware,
Of the workstations citywide have been affected. So out of roughly 32, it's in the statement, but of roughly 3,200 workstations and laptops, 158 were affected. Of the ones that are affected, 100% of those have been replaced using insurance proceeds.
And what about the system? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
You mean the servers, you mean, or the number? All the servers are back up and running.
How about the functionality?
Yeah, so everything is fully functional now. Everything is fully functional. There's some historical data that still needs to be replaced. It's hard to put a number on that. And so that's what they're working on now.
Okay.
Yeah, things are working. There's historical data that needs to be, cobbled back together from different places. And I'll give you a more concrete example. So the GIS system, right, which is a database that covers, the city's hard infrastructure, right, above ground and underground, like maps out the streets, both above ground and below ground infrastructure. So that had been encrypted. We've been able to effectively reconstitute that by, again, I don't want to get too specific, but there are backup servers and email and a number of other sources that allow us to put it back together and back to functionality. All right, again, I just want to thank everybody for their hard work. These things are unfortunate. I mean, we've seen these things play out all over the country, and New Bedford, Massachusetts could have had it a lot worse, and we're going to continue to make sure that we have the latest and greatest antiviral technology protocols and all the other protections that we need to avoid these problems in the future. So,
I'm sorry, one
Yep.
follow-up. Based on what you just said. Have you guys been talking to any other municipalities, or have they been inquiring with you, hey, what happened, what can we do to harden our system, any of that kind of talk going on?
So, I don't know, I mean, have we gone, I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of, Ari, is there, or John?
Generally, you could, try to keep themselves in the same.
Yeah, I mean, but look, I mean, so if there are best practices to be shared, we will readily share them. You know, we've learned a few things along the way here. What's that?
Well, often the one who deals with municipalities.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, just to give you a sense of the volume of attacks. So, you know, our insurance carrier is AIG. AIG has, you know, a law firm that they assign these matters to that's based outside of Philadelphia. And the day that we were hit, they picked up 6 other clients. So, you know, just to give you a sense of, you know, just how many of these things are happening across the United States. A lot of them don't see the light of day. A lot of them don't end up in the public realm. The vast majority don't, as we understand it.
Everything that's been paid for has been through the insurance, the hardware replacement, the consultants, and everything else has been done.
Right.
Do you have a dollar amount, how much is paid out to the insurance?
I don't know if we have a current number. We're projecting, yeah, it's in the hundreds of thousands, but at the end of the day, the work's still going on. So once we're done with that work, we can make that number public. Okay, all right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.